Today we're going to start with a highlight on California, and I want to welcome Glenda Humiston, my super boss, Vice President of University of California for the agri-natural resources side of the university. She's really at the pinnacle of that link between science and communities. She oversees the Agricultural Experiment Station and Cooperative Extension within the University of California system, which works throughout all counties in California to extend the knowledge that's generated at the university to farmers and work hand in hand with farmers on management practices. She has a lot of experience in the public policy sector. She has been the Deputy Undersecretary for Natural Resources and Environment at the USDA. She managed the Sustainable Development Institute at the 2002 World Summit for Sustainable Development in South Africa, as well as the World Water Forum in Mexico City in 2006. Welcome, Glenda Humiston.
Thank you, Thomas. It is really a pleasure to be here, and it's really a pleasure to have a chance to moderate this wonderful panel that we've got up here. To set the stage for that, I've been asked to just give a little broad overview of what is going on in California currently around water issues, and set the stage for these folks to dig a little deeper into our Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and all the efforts around that. So one thing I think everybody here knows is that water insecurity and climate change are huge challenges that we are literally facing throughout the world. As you can see from these maps of the U.S. on the side, every single year there is a drought somewhere. Might be in the east one year, might be out here, might be multi-year out here, as we're currently suffering in California and other parts of the West. But it's not just the droughts the issue. One of the reasons I love this map of California is this is some work that a partnership of the State Energy Commission, UC Davis, and others have done, where they're really trying to look at how several vulnerabilities interact with each other so that we can really target where we need to put efforts and actions and investment. So this particular map where you're seeing the dark red there is where the worst intersections of climate vulnerability, land use vulnerability, socioeconomic, and crop vulnerability intersect. It's a great planning tool for us as we try to target our resources and our efforts. We at the University of California, as Thomas mentioned, have offices throughout the state working on this, and a host of advisors and specialists and researchers, and perhaps most important of all, our cooperators, the farmers and the landowners and the partners we work with in the field, often on joint projects, and the various universities throughout the system. Specifically within that is our Water Resources Institute. And for those of you that really do want to get a sense of all the research going on throughout the California system, this is a great website. This is part of the national network supported by the Federal Water Resources Research Act of 1964. So we get funding from USGS to maintain this on behalf of California to help coordinate all the different research going on around water, but also to interact with our partners in other states so we can share information and actually facilitate a lot of joint multi-state research. And that research has really developed a great deal of new technologies, new knowledge, water efficiencies, ways to improve irrigation, reduce water use, and measure and model and so forth and so on. The knowledge and the tools we've got out here now compared to even 5 or 10 years ago are truly extraordinary. But one of the unintended consequences that we need to keep in mind as we think about water management is as we irrigate with less water on the surface, we are not recharging groundwater in the ways our good old flood irrigation used to do. So what impact is that having on groundwater basins? Just to show you the complexity of the issue. And there you go. There's the complexity of the issue. All too often, the various people working on water are coming at it from just feeling or seeing or studying one tiny bit of the overall picture. And if they're not communicating, well, then how do we actually develop that shared understanding of the problem, find some agreement on recommendations, and then actually work together seeking action? We got to rip those blindfolds off, folks. That's led to some efforts here in the state I want to share with you, one of which is our California Roundtable on Water and Food Supply that was launched in 2010. This is one of those efforts that brings together a very diverse array of stakeholders, many of whom argue with each other an awful lot. But one of the reasons this roundtable works, and others like it, is that when we're in the room for the roundtable meeting and the door is closed, what goes on in the room stays in the room. The only thing that comes out after several meetings are the consensus items that are in very brief reports with some recommendations. But it really allows some folks that truly do have very different opinions and goals and ideas to really dig into those and work at it. It's been a great effort. University of California is just one of many, many, many partners in this. Several state agencies, federal agencies, our agricultural community, our environmental community, and others. We've now published about 4 reports. A 5th one is due to hit the press at any time. We were hoping it would be here in time for this, but it's probably a few days out. They ranged from the very first one, which was just about water conservation, how to be more efficient, how to conserve water. The second one really got into new and different ways to look at storage and retention. The third one, we wanted to look at connectivity. What does that mean? And then, of course, the 4th one really dug into groundwater using the Kings River Basin as an example. So, some examples of that kind of work, this is from the second one, where we really are looking at how we are able to manage upper watershed health could have a huge impact on the water that comes off of some of these watersheds for use in the valley. And this is important. 9 to 16% more water off of our Sierra and Cascade mountain systems is huge when you consider they produce about 60% of the water that California utilizes. The third one, as I mentioned, the connectivity, was really trying to see how can we design some resilient water infrastructure and new ways to work. And that led us into the connectivity approach, where we're really trying to tie together upper and lower watershed, surface and groundwater, find some alignment of governance structures and tools, and then improving stakeholder engagement, all of which hopefully will lead to better investment. Concurrent with that effort, the state government was developing the California Water Action Plan, which is a very broad-based document that really gets into 10 recommendations on how California as a whole can improve its water management, both surface, ground, and everything in between. One of the things that's now coming at a cross-section with the state government effort and the California Roundtable's effort is a focus on how can we bring those two conversations together and look at moving forward action. Because there's been a lot of talk, there's been a lot of reports, there's a lot of recommendations out there. How do we move to action? So this is just photos I took of some of the meeting documents up on the wall, looking at which institutions and organizations have to be involved. How do they fit geospatially when we start looking at management? And what are the different time scales they represent? Because some of this work requires some sequencing. Another group that's going on right now, and this is important too, this Working Landscapes Action Team, which was formed as part of our State Economic Summit. And it was formed largely because when the very first State Economic Summit occurred in 2012, 500 of some of our best and brightest in California. And at the end of the day, you would have thought the California economy was located on a barren asteroid in outer space. Not a word, hardly a word about water or soil or natural resources or agriculture or anything related to it. So because of that, many of us felt that that just was not the conversation we needed to have moving forward. We spent the next year lobbying very hard at the regional forums leading up to the next state forum to charter a Working Landscapes Action Team. And these numbers are important because all too often, agriculture gets overlooked. That's, as Thomas said earlier, that's one of the most important reasons to have this conversation about agriculture and groundwater, because it often gets overlooked. And some of that's just because of the way we look at numbers. I can't begin to tell you how frustrated, even angry I get when I hear very intelligent people making extremely stupid statements like, and I've heard this way too often, and if there's some of you in the audience that have said it, please listen now. California agriculture is only 2% of the state's GDP. Why should we even bother with it? Okay, excuse me. That is an extremely stupid statement. First of all, GDP is not a good measure of anything. And second of all, it doesn't take into account all of the support and multipliers around ag. So we actually chartered a group to look at what really is the value of ag. Because at that first economic summit, they had the very traditional pie chart. Wholesale, retail, transportation, entertainment, etc. You don't see ag, you don't see natural resources in that. It's all in how you tease the data out. What we found using 2012 data, this was a report that was done, is that working landscapes, of which ag is over half, 318 billion in direct sales alone. And I can tell you that number does not really include recreation on rural working landscapes, which is a huge, huge number. You throw a little bit of multiplier on that, you're talking almost a third, perhaps more than a third of the state's economy. Now, that has an impact, and that is causing people to look at this much more closely. So one of the things we've got going on right now, again, bringing the various players together, two working groups for the State Economic Summit that are now collaborating with the Roundtable, the state, and others, one specifically looking at ecosystem services and how they interact with water, land use, etc. In fact, that meeting is happening just in a couple, in fact, it's next week maybe, July 6th, if that's next week. And then a separate group that's looking purely at groundwater, and this is going to be in October. And this is where, again, we're organizing meetings to bring all the various players to the table, not unlike what you're doing today with exchanging information, but in this case, a smaller group and including a lot of policymakers to talk about what can we do, how can we move forward. It's really about, and this is from the connectivity report, changing how we look at these systems. Quit the stovepiping, start communicating, start measuring and analyzing all of this in a comprehensive fashion, and really find that connectivity approach. Which leads us to, last but not least, the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act here in California, something very new a few years ago. I'm not going to go into details on this. I did throw the map up there of where we sort of are, and that's available on this great website at California Groundwater, which I urge you to go take a look at. The state has put up. But we've got three expert speakers here who are going to dive into that a little bit, as well as groundwater in general. So with that, let me offer the stage to them. I'm not going to go into a large biography introduction of them. If you look in your package, you're going to see that all the speakers' biographies are there. But first up, I will have Karen Ross, who is currently serving as Secretary for our California Department of Agriculture, appointed by Governor Jerry Brown. Following her will be another Governor Brown appointment, Gordon Burns, who is the Undersecretary for the California Environmental Protection Agency. And then last, but very much not least, Perry Klassen, who is with the East San Joaquin Valley Agricultural Water Quality Coalition, who's going to really bring us that on-the-ground perspective. So with that, Karen, I'm going to turn the mic over to you.